what we have previously been discussing about the misconceptions that people have about life. I'm going to use an example. It's probably not such a good example. You know this movie Matrix? Did you ever see that? I mean, what was it, in a nutshell, what's the underlying thing? That people were moving around in the world, they had these lives and everything, but actually it was all like a dream. It was all just an illusion. The reality was that they were all stuck in these pods, and the machines had them or something, and were using their body as a source of tapping into the energy that was being produced by the body, so they had this massive source of energy. And they were kept in this almost comatose state and living this fantasy mental world where people were going about doing everything. And that was kind of like the big revelation at the end, that this world in which everybody was living was all false. It was a state of mind. It was kind of like a dream, and the reality was far more tragic. In some ways, not like that, but there is some, I guess, certain type of similarity. The view that is taught in the yoga process is this fact that we are not these bodies. This world is not our home. There is no real shelter here. You will live within this body for a certain time and you will leave it. And all of the relationships that you built, all of the acquisition of assets and things will all be terminated with finality. So we see in these yogic teaching that the various yoga processes, which include amongst the asana, the practice of asana, the practice of pranayam, meditation, and the more spiritual practices, they are all meant to help remove the myriad of misconceptions that constitute most people's lives. So, in order to come to a platform of understanding, Pantanjali, he states that the actual sources of correct understanding, not of misconception, the opposite, correct understanding, are direct perception, inference, and the words, whether written or spoken, of self-realized authorities. This is a direct perception, if it is properly guided, is extremely helpful. We can come to understand truths. But we must accept that there are certain shortcomings that all people have. For instance, everyone can be subject to illusion. This is what makes it so that the guys with the big magic shows in Las Vegas, the illusionists, they're called illusionists, right? I mean, who are some of the famous guys? David Copperfield, Penn and Teller before, huh? Blaine, David Blaine, you know, all these guys, they are called illusionists because they will produce what looks to be a real experience, but it is actually an illusion that is created. And a common untrained person looks at it and they buy into it. Other forms of illusion, you know, it was common in the old days when they would have sailing ships and people would be at sea for months at a time under very harsh conditions. People would start hallucinating that they see landforms on the horizon. And if they do not stay the course, they start heading towards these landforms. They can wander all over the ocean and perish. In desert environments, mirages actually appear. And people, particularly when their body and their minds are greatly stressed from lack of water, heat, lack of food, these type of things, or even if they're perfectly healthy, just because of the way that the waves of heat rise off the deserts, you can look and actually see bodies of water, an oasis, and you can run towards it, wanting to dive into it and end up with a mouthful of sand. And that is because it is an inherent, it is built in to the nature of the body, the mind, that we can be subject to illusion. Every person has a propensity towards cheating. Unfortunately, we can convince ourselves of things that we want to believe in that are not actually true. We can try and convince others of things that are not true. This propensity to cheat ourselves and others exists. Our senses are all inherently imperfect. Even when you rely on devices to magnify the power of your senses, the senses are inherently imperfect, and so you can become mistaken. These are some of the natural characteristics that exist in the body and mind. And so while direct perception is important, it cannot truly be relied on alone. But when we speak of direct perception, it's more in the case of very fundamental things. For instance, a child looks at a candle or some fire or flame. What does a little baby want to do when they see fire? They want to touch it. It's like, wow! And they reach out immediately and want to touch. And what's the best way to teach a child not to touch a flame?
Let him touch it.
No, that's really cruel. You don't let them touch it. You hold their hand or their finger and you put it close, 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 so they can start feeling the heat and the burning sensation. Then they start resisting and they're trying to pull their hand back. When you feel them pulling the hand back, you know, okay, they've learned. And then next time they see it, they know what it is. If you actually burn yourself, then you become familiar with this idea that when you feel an intense heat close to the skin, that there is a danger of getting seriously hurt. And so you build a natural reaction that when your hand, even unconsciously, not looking, but you're reaching for something, and it feels something hot, immediately as you pull it away. You have now this ability, you see something that's glowing hot, and you can see the heat rising off it. And you know, I ain't going to touch that because I know what's going to happen. You can infer